I'm Takashi from NTT, and today I will talk about the round complexity of black box post-quantum secure computation. And this is joint work with Rohit, Xiao, and Omkant. And as you can see, the slides are prepared by Xiao, but unfortunately, he couldn't attend the conference due to some visa problem. So that okay? So Xiao cannot give the talk, so I will give the talk instead. How to go to the next page? One? Wait. Okay. So MPC is a fundamental and important tool or the primitive in cryptography. And I don't think I need to give the formal definition of the MPC for this audience, but I would like to emphasize that the MPC security is the simulation-based one, and its security proofs typically involve the rewinding technique. And then, when we think about the quantum adversary, the things get tricky. The reason is that when we do the rewinding-based security proof, we have to run some adversary from some certain point of the execution. And this implicitly assumes that we can copy the adversary's internal state and we can run as many times as we want. But when the adversary is quantum, it may keep some internal quantum state. And so due to the non-cloning theorem, it may not be possible to run the adversary many times. And so when we use the rewinding-based technique and we want to generalize to the post-quantum security, we have to reinvestigate the security proofs. And in particular, we think in this work, we focus on the post-quantum setting where the honest parties are entirely classical and they're communicating over classical channel. But we consider the quantum adversaries, and that computes quantum computation locally. But of course, it is interacting over classical channel with the honest classical parties. And this setting is challenging due to the asymmetric power between the quantum adversary and the classical honest parties. And even though our main focus is on the post-quantum setting, but I would like to mention that such a result often extends to the fully quantum setting where even the honest party is quantum and they're trying to compute the quantum functionality by multi-party computation. So there are several fundamental aspects of MPC, and in particular in this work we focus on the following three: the round complexity and the minimal assumptions, which is the semi-honest oblivious transfer, and the black box constructions. So what are black box constructions? Roughly speaking, it means that the constructions only make input-output access to the building blocks such as oblivious transfer or pseudorandom generator and so on. And why do we study black box construction? And there are several reasons. The first, it enables us to give a more modular design of protocol. The second, the black box construction often leads to better efficiency compared to non-black box construction. Third, the black box construction is valid even if some of the building blocks are some physical objects, such as the tamper-proof hardware and so on. And also, finally, traditionally, I would like to emphasize that traditionally, the black box construction is an important research theme, and so it is theoretically interesting on its own as well. And let me review what is known about post-quantum MPC. So this shows the state of the art. And the first two works on the top give the multi-party computation. So I mean post-quantum multi-party computation in constant rounds. However, they are non-black box constructions and rely on non-black box simulation, and also rely on some stronger assumption than the minimal assumption of the post-quantum oblivious transfer. And the work of CCLY22 constructed post-quantum two-party computation in constant rounds, and it relied on black box construction, and it is from the minimal assumption of the post-quantum oblivious transfer. But the caveat of this construction is that it only achieves security which is called epsilon simulation security, which is slightly weaker than the standard simulation-based security. And in fact, this relaxation to epsilon simulation is unavoidable when we consider black box constant round construction. So this is unavoidable. But still, there is a room of improvement in this result because this CCLY22 is limited to two-party computation rather than multi-party computation. So given this state of result, we can ask the following two open questions. One, can we construct two-party or multi-party computation that makes black box use of the building block and also relies on the minimum assumption and achieving the standard simulation-based security, allowing using the super constant number of rounds of the interaction. And the second open question is if we can get post-quantum multi-computation in the constant rounds and in the black box manner and rely on the minimum assumption. And in this setting, we have to relax the security to epsilon simulation, so we only aim for epsilon simulation. So these are two open problems. And in this work, we answer these questions affirmatively. And in the first theorem, we construct post-quantum two-party computation in slightly super constant number of rounds, and it is a black box and based on minimum assumption and achieving the standard simulation-based security. The second result extends it to the multi-party setting at the cost of relying on using the polynomial number of rounds rather than slightly super constant number of rounds. And our third theorem gives a post-quantum MPC in constant rounds in black box manner based on almost minimum assumptions. And that is achieves the epsilon simulation security. And what is almost minimal? So concretely, we rely on either or post-quantum lossy PKE, linearly homomorphic PKE, or dense crypto system. And I would like to mention that even in the classical setting, if we want to get a black box constant round MPC, then we have to rely on the classical analog of this assumption. So this matches the best in the classical setting, and this is why I regard this as almost minimal assumption. And this gives the full picture for the random complexity of black box post-quantum MPC. So let me get into more detail about our first result, which is black box post-quantum 2PC from the minimum assumption, and that uses slightly super constant rounds but achieves the standard simulation-based security. And let's review how this is done in the classical setting. So the minimum assumption is a semi-honest OT. So we start from semi-honest OT, and first we upgrade this to the maliciously secure OT, and then we compile it into MPC. And in the first step, where we upgrade semi-honest OT to malicious OT, there are two choices. The first is a GMW style compiler relying on zero-knowledge proofs. But this technique is inherently non-black box, so this is not suitable for our purpose. The second option is the cut-and-choose based techniques, and this gives the black box construction, and so this is what we use. And for the second step of upgrading malicious OT to MPC, there is a black box information theoretical technique to do that. And we want to get the post-quantum version of these results. And we observe that for the second step, to upgrade malicious OT to MPC, the same construction works relatively straightforwardly, and so that works in the post-quantum setting as well. So the main challenge in this work is to quantize the first step, where we upgrade semi-honest OT to malicious OT. And as I mentioned, we want to get the quantum version or post-quantum version of the cut-and-choose technique to upgrade semi-honest OT to malicious OT. And for doing that, the key component is what is called post-quantum extractable commitment. And that should be constructed in black box manner because we are aiming for black box construction. So what is post-quantum extractable commitment? Roughly speaking, it requires that we have a quantum polynomial time simulation extractor that can extract the committed message from a malicious committer at the same time while simultaneously simulating the post-extraction state of the committer. So what is known about post-quantum extractable commitment? The work of CCLY22 constructed a post-quantum extractable commitment from post-quantum one-way function, and that is the black box, and that is constant round. However, it only achieved epsilon simulation security, which is slightly weaker than the standard simulation-based security. And as I said, we want to achieve the standard simulation-based security here, so we cannot rely on this result. So instead of this, we want to get post-quantum extractable commitment that achieves the standard simulation security. And as I said, there is an impossibility for standard simulation security for black box and the constant round construction. So we rely on super constant number of round about achieve the standard simulation security. And also we rely on the slightly stronger assumption of semi-honest post-quantum OT rather than post-quantum one function. But in the end, anyway, if we want to get the MPC or 2PC, we need OT. So this is still the minimum assumption for our final goal. And we construct a new post-quantum extractable commitment with those properties. And by plugging this post-quantum extractable commitment to the existing template, we can get a two-party computation in black box manner in slightly constant number of rounds and achieve the standard simulation security. So, okay, so let me mention a further application of our black box MPC. And recently there have been an active research topic called microcrypt. And this roughly refers to a cryptography in the world where P equal NP, but still some kind of quantum cryptography is possible. And this is made possible because the honest party is quantum so that it doesn't contradict P equal NP. And the recent work by Kretschmer, Chen, and Tao constructed a graphical oracle relative to which a P equal NP, yet LOCC semi-honest OT exists. So LOCC means that the parties can perform local quantum operations, but every communication are done over graphical channel. And the nice thing about our black box construction is that because that is fully black box, it works equally well in the LOCC setting as well. And by simply plugging the result into our fully black box compiler from semi-honest OT to MPC, as a corollary, we get a graphical oracle relative to which P equal NP, yet LOCC MPC exists. So next, let me move on to our second result, which is the black box post-quantum MPC in constant rounds, and that achieves the epsilon simulation security. And so let me review what is known. And in the work of CCLY22, they constructed constant round black box construction of post-quantum two-party computation. And then one might think that it's easy to generalize this to the multi-party computation, but actually it's not the case, and because there is one missing tool, which is one many non-malleable commitment in constant round. So let me explain what is non-malleable commitment. So non-malleable commitment, we consider a man-in-the-middle adversary that interact with the honest committer in the left session and honest receiver in the right session. And the non-malleability informally requires that the committed message M tilde in the right session should not depend on the committed message in the left session, which is M. And why do we need non-malleability for MPC? So this is just a rough explanation. Imagine that we want to do three-party computation for computing the sum of the input. And suppose that the third party P3 is corrupted and malicious. Then the third party, malicious party, may try to set its input as effectively the negative x1, which is the negation of the first party's input. And then just run the protocol. Then x1 plus x3 it cancels out. And as a result, the third party, the malicious third party, runs the x2, which is the input of the honest party, fake and honest party, I mean. And so this breaks the security of MPC. And so we have to prevent such an attack. And so this can be seen as a kind of non-malleability. And this explains the intuition of why we need a non-malleability for ensuring the security of MPC. So for getting MPC, what we really need is something called one-many parallel non-malleability. So in this setting, we consider man-in-the-middle algebra 3 that is interacting with one honest committer in the left session and many honest receiver in the right session. And the security requires that any of the committed message in the right session should not depend on the committed message in the left session. And why do we need this security? Intuitively speaking, in MPC protocol, there are many parties and interacting simultaneously. And so we have to consider many sessions simultaneously, and that's why we consider this setting. And why don't we consider many settings instead many settings where there are also many committed? And this is because this one-many setting actually implies the many security. And so for simplicity, we can just focus on this one-many non-malleable commitment. And also I would like to mention that for the purpose of MPC, we don't need to think about the full concurrency, and we only need to think about the synchronous setting, because in MPC typically we only consider synchronous communication pattern. And given this, our main technical contribution can be phrased like this. We construct post-quantum one-many parallel non-malleable commitment in constant runs and making black box use of post-quantum Wien functions. And actually, what we achieve is slightly weaker than the standard parallel non-malleability, but that is still sufficient for MPC. And for the detail of this weaker variant, please refer to our paper. So by plugging this new one-many weak parallel non-malleable commitment to the existing construction, or we can upgrade the result of CCLY22 from two-party computation to multi-party computation. And let me also mention another application of one-many non-malleable commitment beyond the construction of MPC. In a recent work by Bostanji, Chen, Spooner, and Yuan, they prove the following. Assuming the existence of constant round many weak parallel post-quantum non-malleable commitment, parallel repetition does not always reduce the soundness error of post-quantum interactive arguments. And as I already explained, we constructed such a non-malleable commitment from post-quantum Wien function. As a result, we can get the same result only assuming the existence of post-quantum Wien functions. And I know that this matches the assumption used in the similar result in the classical setting. And so, yeah, this is almost optimal assumption. And this is summary of my talk. So we show the three results, and the first result gives the post-quantum two-party computation in slightly super constant round, and it is black box and based on the minimal assumption of post-quantum omnibus transfer, and achieves the standard simulation-based security. And the second result extends the first result to the multi-party setting at the cost of increasing the number of rounds. And the third result gives the post-quantum MPC in constant number of rounds and in black box manner, and relies on almost minimum assumption, but it only achieves the weaker security called epsilon simulation security. And as byproduct of our result, we get these two results. One is LOCC MPC in microcrypt, and the other is a counterexample to soundness amplification for constant round post-quantum argument, only based on post-quantum Wien function. So this is the end of my talk. Thank you for your attention.
Next step and for question. About one random or how does the landscape it's not
Quantum random oracle model. I think so. Even with our quantum random oracle model, if we use a common random string, then things become very easy because you don't need to care about the rewinding.
I see.
Yeah.
The black box setting you have to use an ACK, but it's a bit. I mean, the black box setting is common random string is not so helpful. You're saying that many cases the question is interesting.
Actually, I'm not sure. So, but the main focus of this work is in the plane model, and yeah, I assume that that would be very easy if we use random oracle or common reference string. But I'm not completely sure about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, the next talk is titled Towards Building Scalable Constant Round MPC for Minimal Assumptions via Round Collapsing by Vipul Goyal, Jun Rowley, Raphael Ostrovsky, and Rifan will give the talk.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. Today I'm very happy to share our recent progress on constant round MPC. So of course, our topic is secure multi-party computation. And in this talk, I'm going to use N for the number of parties and T for the number of quadparties. We assume a P2P channel between every pair of parties. And we focus on the synchronous network. We consider both the answer majority setting and the distance majority setting with gap. That is like the quadparties is 1 minus epsilon times N, where epsilon is some constant between 0 and 1. We aim to achieve malicious security with the vault, and we want to just use lightweight cryptographic primitive that in particular does not imply fully homomorphic encryption. So we want to build a constant round MPC protocol, and our goal is to improve the communication complexity. So in the literature, we can basically have two categories of MPC protocols, one based on secret sharing. For those kind of protocols, we can achieve a good communication efficiency. For example, we know how to achieve linear communication back in 2007 in the answer majority setting, and the speed protocol in the distance majority setting. And if you have a gap, either in the answer majority or the distance majority, you can even achieve order of C communication, which is independent of the number of parties. But if you check the number of rounds, this kind of protocols usually need to interact in every layer of the circuit, so the number of rounds grows linearly with the circuit depths. Another category focuses on achieving constant number of rounds. They're usually based on the Gauss-Garbo circuits. And following the BMR template, you can achieve CN square kappa communication, where kappa is the security parameter, only assuming black box use of pseudo-random generator or random oracle. Or you can achieve like linear communication, but you need stronger assumptions. With stronger answer majority, basically the gap, answer majority with gap, you can also achieve order of C communication, but again, you need stronger assumption. So you can see, compared with the first category, either you need to pay more in the communication, or you need to use some stronger cryptographic assumptions. So this leads to our following question, whether we can build constant round MPC with constant communication overhead, basically just order of C communication, for example, just from lightweight cryptographic primitives. So we obtain the following results. First, just assuming random oracles, we get a 5-round MPC that can tolerate up to 1/4 corruption with communication order of C times kappa plus dn square kappa. So here, these the circuit depths. And by using random OTs and party virtualization technique, we can boost the corruption threshold to the distance majority with gap. So we can achieve almost the same communication complexity in the distance majority setting for any constant gap. And from theorem 2, we also get an interesting corollary. So in the standard answer majority setting, you can think that it's just a distance majority with gap, where the gap is epsilon to be a half. So in this case, we can remove the assumption of OT. Basically, we can prepare a small number of OT and then use random oracle for OT extension. So we get a protocol in the plain model, assuming random oracle, but you do not need to use OT. You get a constant round MPC with out of C times kappa communication. Okay, so at a high level, for our technique, we first built a round compression compiler for certain class of non-constant round MPC protocol. You will see later that basically our idea is to garble each party's next round message function, and then we want the evaluator to emulate the underlying protocol locally. Then we instantiate the underlying MPC protocol by using packet secret sharing to achieve the desired efficiency. And in particular, we use AG codes because the secrets we handle are in the binary field, so we do not want to use, say, packet secret sharing, which may lead to some log n overhead. And finally, we use party virtualization to boost the corruption threshold, and we use MPC in the head to achieve malicious security. And I want to mention some limitations and probably future directions. So you can see that we have this term depending on the circuit depths in the communication, which usually does not occur in the this constant round MPC, say based on the BMR template. This is mainly because we use packet sharing in the underlying non-constant round MPC protocol, where we need to compute multiple gates in each layer. So an interesting question is whether we can remove this term, or even say just achieving linear in the number of parties. And second is that our protocol is far from being practical, so we are happy to see any improvements to make it, to be more concrete efficient. And finally, we need to use random oracle to support free XOR operation and the compact commitments. So it is an interesting question to see whether we can obtain a similar result, say just from black box use of one-way function. Okay, so I'm going to talk some techniques. So starting from the Yos garble circuits, we know we can use it to construct constant round two-party computation. Basically, one party acting as the garbler will compute some encrypted version of the circuit or the garble circuits and send it to the evaluator. Then they are going to use OT protocols to let the evaluator learn the secret keys associated with the input wires, or you can say that they are the wire labels. Then the evaluator can compute the circuit locally and obtain the function output. Now, if you want to turn this idea into the multi-party setting, we cannot let a single party acting as the garbler due to the collusion between the garbler and the evaluator. So all the parties will together run some generic MPC protocol to emulate garbler's computation. And the key idea here is that the computation depth of the garbler is constant. So you can use a GMW construction to compute garbler's computation, which still gives you the constant number of rounds. But the difficulty here is that you need to use an MPC protocol for the underlying cryptographic primitive, which means that you need to use them in a non-black box way, which may incur additional communication or computation overhead. So the previous solutions, basically, they solve them in two directions. One is to use MPC-friendly assumptions so that you can compute them without having a large overhead, but then you need some non-standard cryptographic assumptions. Or you can use the idea from DI-05, where each party generates his own wire labels so that you can use those assumptions in a black box way, but this will increase the garble circuit size by a factor of n. So our starting point is to compile a non-constant round MPC protocol, so we do not follow the BMR template. Let's say we have some non-constant round MPC. Then what we want to do is to let each party garble his next message functions. So we have a collection of garble circuits, and we send all of them to the evaluator. Then we hope that the evaluator can just compute those garble circuits, say round by round, so that he can finally obtain the output. But the difficulty, if you think about this, is how to let the evaluator obtain the wire labels for the next round garble circuit. Because anyway, only the garbler knows the input variables, right? It's not, but if you want the evaluator to learn this variable, then probably you will leak some information to the message sender. So we try to solve this issue, and our first observation is that if you check most of the secret sharing-based MPC protocols, you can separate them into two phases, where in the preprocessing phase, it can be run in constant number of runs. And in the online phase, you only need to do public reconstruction. So if you are familiar with the DM protocol, then that is one example. In particular, in the online phase here, you can basically run the protocol over the broadcast channel, and the party only needs the secret to be reconstructed to him in the next round. So an illustration is that you can see in the first round, parties will compute some secret sharing, and then they will reconstruct the secret to the first party, and the first party will only use the secrets in the second round. Okay, now recall that what we want to do is to let party to garble his own next message function. So think about that P1 tries to garble his second round garble circuit. He will choose the variables for the value Z, and now the evaluator, if he wants to compute the garble circuit in the second round, he needs to learn the variable associated with Z. And how to do that? So we know that you can compute LZ by LW plus Z times L1 minus LW, L0. Then if you start with a multiplicative and linear secret sharing scheme, for example, the Shamir secret sharing scheme, then we can ask P1 to share the variables to all the parties. And all the parties with secret share of Z, they can do this computation locally, so they can compute a share of LZ. So what we just need to do is to ask each party's garble circuits to not only output his share of Z, but also his share of the variable. In this way, the evaluator will learn both sharings. He can reconstruct the secret and use LZ to compute the second round garble circuit. So in summary, for every reconstruction Z to some party P1, P1 will share the variables, and all the parties will garble their next message functions so that it will output his share of Z and LZ. And then in the evaluation phase, the evaluator will obtain both the sharing of Z and sharing of LZ, so that he can reconstruct the secret and do the evaluation for the next round. Okay, now the communication of our compiler is the total communication of the underlying non-constant round MPC protocol plus the computation of the online protocol, because we garble each party's local computation. So if we want to achieve the desired efficiency, we want to make sure that the underlying protocol have order of C communication and also order of C computation in the online phase. And we instantiate this protocol from our previous work using packet secret sharing, and we use AG code again because we need to handle the binary secrets. We do not want to have any overhead depending on the number of parties. But one particular issue is that the previous construction used the king idea to reconstruct the secrets. Basically, you send the shares to some party king, and that party reconstructs the secret and sends the result back. But this kind of reconstruction is not supported in our compiler, so we need to do some modification. The good news is that we can still maintain out of C communication, but now you need to evaluate n square gates in each layer. So this is the reason we have this dn square in the communication. However, if you check the computation complexity, we actually still need to pay a linear computation per multiplication. And this is even true if you handle the SIMD circuits, just because the modified reconstruction protocol. So we noticed that in our construction, most of the operations are addition operations. And if you only count the multiplication operations per party, it's still like out of one. So this is the good news. So we use the free XOR technique for garble circuit, and this is the place we need to use random oracle. So in summary, you can get the first result, which only tolerates one false corruption. But you can boost the corruption threshold by using party virtualization. Basically, you start with some actual parties, and those parties will form some committees, and you use dishonest majority protocol within the committee to emulate virtual parties and then use virtual parties to run the actual protocol. Now, the benefit is that if the committee contains at least one honest party, then the view of this virtual party is not known to the adversary, so we can get a smaller corruption threshold for the virtual parties. So in general, if we have 1 minus epsilon times n quiet parties, then you can choose a constant number of, you can choose a constant C to be the size of the committee. And when you sample a random subset of C parties, then you can make this corruption threshold to be close to what we want. And if you select, say, out of kappa random committees, then using Chernoff bounds, with very high probability, this will be the final virtual parties will have the desired corruption threshold. But if you want to make it to be, say, achieving adaptive security, then you can actually apply in the union bound and you select more virtual parties. So it's good, even if you want to achieve adaptive security. So now you just use this idea together with our basic protocol, and you can obtain the second result. And here we need to use random OT to instantiate the underlying dishonest majority protocol inside of the committee. And I just want to mention that this is needed because anyway, if you are working on the dishonest majority setting, you need OT. And by the way, the term n plus kappa is from the number of committees we need to use. Okay, and finally, from the corollary, basically you just use some honest majority MPC to prepare some limited number of random OT, and then use random oracle to get many OTs so that you can remove the assumption of OT. Okay, so I think that is all I want to talk. I'm very happy to take any question.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Any questions? Okay, so question. So in terms of computational overhead, you have an like factor of n extra compared to the communication, right? So
Yes.
do you see any conceivable way of mitigating the computation, making computation match the communication roughly?
Yeah, so I think probably we can use like one of your paper in 2010 that you can achieve the, I mean, if you have the gap, you can achieve probably C log C communication and C log C computation. And probably we can use some ideas there. So in our case, we are focusing on out of C communication, and this is the reason probably you need to have C times N computation. But if you relax these requirements, then, and also probably use some efficient protocol for interpolation. Okay, maybe not interpolation because we use AJ code here. But basically, it's like you need to do some reconstruction. And if you have some better protocol for that part, maybe you can increase, you can reduce the computation complexity. But that is only my guess.
I see. So basically, with polylog extra overheads, you can get rid of this.
Yeah, I hope so, but we still need to check the details.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, so let's thank Ifan again. Okay. It's supposed to be in person, but the last talk is on Zoom.
The last?
The third. Yeah, you're right. The next talk is. The third talk is supposed to be in person. Sengwan Lee in person.
Wasn't that just you?
No, this was Yifan Song. The third talk is titled Actively Secure MPC. Is the speaker of the third talk here? So maybe the speakers are not here, so maybe we can switch to the last talk if the speaker is online. Okay.
Oh. So
It's laser.
laser.
That's forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you
Okay,
for sorry for that. And
yeah, the third talk of the session, still in-person talk about actively secure MPC in the dishonest majority setting by Sengwan Lee, Jae-sang No, Tai-jong Kim, Do-yok Kim, and Dong-jun Shin, and Sengwan will give the talk.
Thank you for introducing, and I'm the speaker Seung-han Lee, although I have no tag because I arrived right on time, but the registration is over, so I'm really Seung-han, trust me, and I already have another issue, but it will be fine. Okay, I'll talk about fee-based MPC achieving active security in the dishonest setting with constant evaluation time in terms of the number of parties. So this is joint work between the company Walnut and the University of Hanyang in Korea. And actually, I have some a little trouble in speaking English, so I wrote some script. So please understand me. Otherwise, I stop 2 minutes or 3 minutes when I feel how to talk, how to. So okay, let's start. Let's start with the MPC. So MPC allows the parties to compute a joint function while keeping input private, but the function should be a public. So this setting is important in our presentation. And there's two types of models, and we will focus on the dishonest majority setting. So there are famous two protocols, BMR and speech protocols, and both protocols requires at least the number of gates communication cost. Then how about the fee-based MPC? So most MPC researchers are skeptical while they heard about fee-based MPC because although we have one clear advantage, constant communication with respect to the number of gates, but we have a lot of issues. The computation time is very slow, and it's even more slow when the number of parties are grows. And we usually require the heavy zero knowledge proof for achieving active security. And this slide is from the NIST NPTS 2023, and this kindly introduced the properties of the MPC. Of course, the fee-based MPC could not achieve among them, but
here's where things stand today. And so we have several improvements, and we market it as a circus. So how can we do this? So our solution is using speech in pre-processing to generate FH evaluation keys. Then ciphertext size, evaluation key size, and gate evaluation speed are the constant and independent of the number of parties. And also we achieve dishonest model and active security. This is for free because of the secret sharing. Note that DDE plus 23 had a similar idea, but they required a power of 2 integer modulus. So our scheme is more general. And let's talk about the other issue. So why we have to use the fee-based MPC. So I want to give an example. So let's imagine there are so many embassies in a foreign country. All embassies want to compute the circuit C via a secure MPC while keeping their circuit C hidden from the foreign country. So it means that the foreign country rules as eavesdropping algebra 3. Since the communication channel belongs to the foreign country. So the question is, can we also hide the circuit C from the foreign country? So that's why we define the circuit private MPC later. And we will talk about later, but the result is that fee-based MPC could achieve the circuit private MPC. So we will talk about later. Okay, then let's start with background. We already know about the LW sample, and we will assume LW sample to be pseudo-random. And we already know the regular encryption schemes, and we will use a lot of times. And addition is very natural, and multiplication is quite complicated, but we could bootstrap. And we know how to convert things from the level encryption scheme to volume encryption scheme thanks to the gentry. And let's talk about the secret sharing. And we will talk about only n out of n linear secret sharing. And each honest shares looks random. The corrupted parties need not be random. Only the message is revealed after summing or the shares. And we will use the speech as a black box, so ideas functionality. Okay, yep. So linear operation is quite similar to LWE, and multiplication requires a protocol. It has a lot of cost compared to linear operations. Okay, then we talk about the threshold FHE. So note that there are so many variants of threshold FHE. In this talk, the goal is to construct variable ciphertext using parameters intended for a single user. So if particles hold shares of secret keys, errors, and random are part from the common reference string, then ciphertext can be computed locally. But the two issues. First, the integer modulus is usually composite number. The second, FHE requires encryptions across different moduli. So using different parameters. So with each other's secrets as the message. So we need to address both. So here's the idea. So let's define the large Q as multiplying all integer modulus we used in our FHE scheme. Suppose we sample keys and noise directory over the composite modulus Q, then projection to each prime modulus give consistency. So everything goes well. But the problem is, even sampling a binary distribution over Q is non-trivial. We cannot implement this by simply calling its rand bit protocol on each modulus. It's just not a random bit sampler. So, but thanks to the inverse transform sampling, if we access to a 1-bit sampler over Q kappa times, then we can sample from arbitrary polynomial bounded distributions. So the problem reduces to constructing an actively secure 1-bit sampler over Q. So actually, in 2022, there is a prior works, a sample 1 bit over auxiliary prime piece of 0. lift to integer relations, then reduce mode out to each prime. So key step is how to recover the k. So if we know the k, then we can construct a random 1-bit sampler on the composite modulus Q. So they also produced the protocols such that every party divide their shares into high part and low part and distribute their high part and reconstruct the k like this. Then the protocol probabilistically reconstruct k except with negligible probability. But they assume corrupted shares are random, which may not hold. This also claims no leakage while running the protocol. We will see some counterexample within 2 pages. And also, they also propose verification protocol with random linear checks. So the protocol is like this. So it's a common random linear checks like speech backchecking protocol. But correctness requires the S of 0 should be lower than auxiliary modulus P of 0. So the parameter seg should be larger to hide message by using smoothing lemma or subsystem like assumption, forcing auxiliary modulus P0 to be very large, for example, 100 bits or more. So that is unfavorable. So our contribution is that we found all leakages which are in boundary cases. So this is a toy example you can easily check out. So this example reveals the message to the corrupted party. So the conclusion is if all shares of honest parties are at the extreme, opening high bits may reveal the message. So the protocol isn't perfectly hiding. And we proposed a protocol by rejection sampling. So the protocol is that parties broadcast indices of share which are in boundary and resample. This restores perfect security even if the corrupted party share are chosen from the adversary, not at random. And also, we have another contribution in verification protocol. So we reduced the size of the random R down to 1 bit using a generalized random smooth lemma we claimed in our paper. So the meaning is straightforward. If the sample x plus y is inside some boundary, then it is perfectly hiding, which means random in that region. So otherwise, leakages are occur. So therefore, the auxiliary prime P of 0 can be as small as 32 bits because if leakage cases are detecting, we reject. Otherwise, we have perfectly hiding property. So this is our second contribution. So this is a summary and comparison between previous and ours. So let's construct a B-based MPC. We call it as the WSB. But we know how to construct. So using our sampler, we combine speech and B into WSB. And sampling secret key and error over the composite modulus Q and projection appropriately, then we could obtain more public key and evaluation key because these are deterministically generated from the secret key and evaluation key error. Sorry, so that it can compute via a multiplicative secret sharing scheme and open and reveal the public key and evaluation key to all parties. And security notation is inherited from the FHE and secret sharing. So indicipate advantage unchanged. Correctness bound depends on FHE error and speech soundness. So the result is quite straightforward. And we investigate asymptotic communication complexity when Jinx type inference key is selected. So these are the results. Details are available in our paper. The summary is evaluation key generation requires just logarithmic rounds in kappa. The kappa is a statistical security parameter. And communication per party is roughly the size of evaluation key, so the quite optimal communication size. Okay, the final topic is the circuit private MPC. Finally, let's discuss about the circuit private MPC. And usually, this is the a common MPC functionality. Describe it as an arithmetic black box model called ABB model. But ABB model leaks circuit information to eavesdroppers, such as how many edges and birds are called. This is very critical when parties make a circuit list and run MPC with circuit in the list, but list is opened. Then the number of callings would be fingerprint of those circuits. So the eavesdropper easily find out the circuit. However, our functionality initialized with the circuit then only has the input and output pages. So even an eavesdropper cannot run the circuit except with the number of input and output. And we think that BMR or speed simulators seem to have troubles since it even does not know how many views it should make. But B-based MPC simulators don't need to simulate output ciphertext, so proofs are feasible. So this is our main result. So, and I want to comment, someone could ask why we don't need the definition of industry PID or the private fee, something like. The first circuit information is already known to all parties. Second, our bound requires the rigorous coordinates bound for B, while this is already utilized countermeasure for achieving industry PID. Hence, our results are not conflict to previous security results for FHE, and prior results are still necessary for constructing something like a function PIR. And we are implementing both FHE and speech over 16-bit over entity-enabled primes and also extended to honest majority with guaranteed output delivery setting. Okay, so thank you for your attention. And also we have been studying the core of gates and preparing several progresses and papers already. So I like to talk with who likes the gate FHE. So please understand my poor English trouble and enjoy it. Again, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Okay, so a question, probably missing a lot. So if you try to compare, say, the computational cost, say the two-party study.
Presenting.
Yes, if you try to compare the computational cost of your protocol, say, garbage circuit-based approach.
Actually, we can compare the setting because I think the computational costs are the FH-based MPC are much more computational cost than the BMR. But there is a hope because in this our setting, the gate speed stands for something like a computational cost, but these are not independent to the number of parties. So I heard that in the BMR setting, if the number of parties are grows, then the speeds are very slow. So I heard that, but in this setting, for example, the two parties, we have to evaluate 3 milliseconds or 4 milliseconds is very slow. But if the number of party becomes 100 or 1,000, it's still evaluating time is to 3 milliseconds or 4 milliseconds. So this is quite hopeful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So the last talk of this session is an online talk. I'm not sure how it is. First, I will see in this conference, so hopefully it all goes well. Okay. Is there a way to communicate with the speaker, like an email? Maybe sending an email? Email. Can you try sending an email? It might work. Looking up on Google, can somebody send an email to the last speaker? You know, maybe let's make a distributed effort. If half of the people here will send an email to the speaker, they'll probably get it. What? Oh, but we have Ifan as a backup. Is Ifan still around or did he escape? Oh, Ifan, yeah, come on. So you can tell us at a high level. It's better than having no talk. This is the punishment for having an online co-author.
For video, right?
Okay, excellent. So we have, oh, I see. So it's a recorded talk? Okay, it's a video. Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Ifan. You're off the hook.
The only known results on constant round AMPC protocol without relying on FHE is provided by Corsator, which requires at least CN cube kappa communication, and it is based on one-way functions. The protocol is constructed in the BMR template, and it achieves guaranteed output delivery as well. The constant run complexity is achieved in the hybrid model given a functionality of ACS, which enables the parties to agree on a common set of parties satisfying a certain property. This process is necessary in AMPC since the parties must agree on a set of parties, will provide the inputs. However, this process cannot be realized using constant rounds in the plain model, but it can be realized within expected constant time. Therefore, the round complexity of an AMPC is often considered in the FACS hybrid model. As we can see, there is a huge gap on the communication complexities between constant and non-constant round AMPC protocols. In this work, we work on bridging this gap. We show that, assuming random oracles, there exists a computationally secure constant round AMPC in the FACS hybrid model against a fully malicious adversary controlling less than n over 3 parties, with communication of O and Cn kappa, plus some sublinear terms to C. Our starting idea of achieving this result is to let all the parties gobble the circuit together and then send the gobbled circuit to all parties. Different from the synchronous setting, that a single evaluator is enough. In the asynchronous setting, an evaluator may never send the output, and the parties cannot decide whether the evaluator is corrupted or the network delay is large. For this reason, to achieve linear communication, we will need an OC kappa size multi-party gobble circuit. Since T-honest parties may not be able to participate in an AMPC, the gobble circuit must be at least be able to be generated in the synchronous setting when n is 2t plus 1. The only known construction with black box use of cryptographic tools is JOS25, which is introduced in the last talk. Now let's briefly review the multi-party gobbling structure of JOS25. At the beginning, the parties first randomly select several constant-sized committees. Then, the parties need to do round collapsing upon an underlying out protocol pi. The actual parties first run a sharing phase to distribute sharings for the preprocessing input data pi among the committees. After that, the committees will act as virtual parties to gobble their local computations via a dishonest majority inner MPC protocol. Then, only the committees formed completely by the corrupted parties are regarded as corrupted virtual parties, since the adversary has full access to them. The other committees are regarded as honest ones. Finally, the parties will run a verification phase on the virtual parties computation using MPC in the head. Now let's think about running the multi-party gobbling process in the asynchronous setting. Recall that the party should first distribute preprocessing and input sharings to the virtual parties in the sharing phase. For this step, a difficulty caused by the asynchrony is that a corrupted party may send his sharings to only a part of the parties, and the rest of the parties may never receive their shares. Next, the committees will run the inner protocol to gobble the virtual parties' local computations for the underlying protocol. However, the inner protocol of JOS25 is dishonest majority, while dishonest majority asynchronous protocol does not exist. Finally, the parties will run the verification phase to check a small fraction of virtual parties' views, which contains the commitments for the inputs and randomness for the inner protocol and the transcripts during the inner protocol executions. While in the asynchronous setting, a corrupted party may never open his commitment and view when he is checked. Now let's conclude the difficulties caused by the asynchrony. The first difficulty we face is how to generate the preprocessing and input sharings for all the parties. The previous solution on this issue is using asynchronous complete secret sharing, but currently such protocols only support some mere sharings. However, the multi-party gobbling of JOS25 requires secret sharings based on AG codes. The second difficulty is the MPC in the head verification. We need to deal with the issues that a corrupted party may never open his commitments and view. The final difficulty is that we cannot run a dishonest majority asynchronous inner protocol. For the first two difficulties, we address them by using asynchronous verifiable information dispersal, AVID, which can be instantiated from RO. For the last difficulty, we address it using a simple idea of running a synchronous inner protocol. I will then introduce in more details how we handle these problems. We first introduce AVID. The goal of AVID is to let all the parties know that a message has been indeedly sent and the receiver eventually receives this message. AVID has two stages. The first stage is a dispersal stage, where the sender disperses the message to all the parties. When a party completes this stage, he obtains a dispersed signal. AVID guarantees that once a single honest party gets the dispersal signal, all the honest parties will eventually get the signal. One thing we need to mention is that we don't require the dispersal process to hide the message against corrupted parties. So secret messages cannot be dispersed via AVID. To send a secret message, we need to first prepare a symmetric key between two parties and then disperse the ciphertext. After the dispersal process, the parties can run a retrieval process to make the receiver retrieve the message. As long as an honest party gets the dispersed signal for this message, the receiver is guaranteed to obtain the correct message eventually. The communication cost of AVID during the dispersal and per-party retrieval is order of the message size plus a polynomial to n kappa. This means that sending all the messages over constant round MPC via AVID only incurs an poly n kappa additive overhead. Now we return to the difficulties we need to address. Recall that the first difficulty we face is that a corrupted party may drop some shares while distributing them, and this is exactly what AVID can prevent from. What we need is to first prepare pairwise symmetric keys to encrypt the shares and then send the ciphertext via AVID. The first step can be instantiated using a general constant round AMPC, which only requires poly n kappa bits of communication. Similarly, AVID can also handle the commitment issue. To commit a message, the parties first prepare secret shared random seed using a constant round ACSS, and then reconstruct the seed to the sender. The seed can be expanded by the random oracle, and then it is used for masking the message. Now the masked message is no longer secret, and it can be dispersed via AVID. While a commitment is open to a party, the parties only need to reconstruct the secret shared seed to the party and let the party retrieve the masked message. Then, the party is able to decrypt the message using the seed. Note that we do not need the party who commit the message for help while opening it. Once a commitment is generated, it can be opened during the verification. The remaining issue we haven't dealt with is that the dishonest majority inner protocols can't run in the asynchronous network. We begin with a few observations on the multi-party gobbling of JOS25. The first observation is that we don't really need all the virtual parties gobble circuits for the evaluation. Instead, we only need enough gobble circuits for the reconstructions of label shares, whose number only relies on the number of corrupted virtual parties. Thus, not all honest virtual parties are required to terminate the inner protocol. The second observation is that without guaranteed termination, a synchronous protocol can run in the asynchronous setting. With the two observations, a natural idea is to run synchronous inner protocol to do the gobbling. Let's see how the synchronous inner protocols are performed. Here's a synchronous round, where the parties exchange messages within a period of delta time. A property of a synchronous round is that all the messages can be received by the receivers in a round. Another property is that when this round finishes, everyone knows that it indeed finishes, and they can continue to exchange messages in the next round. This prevents a corrupted party from changing a message in the previous round based on the messages received in the current round. To run a synchronous protocol in the asynchronous network, we can simply let all the parties send messages using AVID plus encryption, like what we do to distribute the sharings. During each synchronous round, the parties wait until the dispersal signals for all the messages are obtained and then continue. In this way, the parties must get all the messages in a synchronous round or the protocol won't terminate. This shows that the first property of a synchronous round can be achieved in the asynchronous network without guaranteed termination. Moreover, whenever an honest party continues in the next round, all the messages sent in the current round are fixed by the AVID. Thus, The property parties cannot change the message as long as an honest party continues, which achieves the second property of a synchronous round. Note that with symmetric keys shared among all parties, the AVIDs for sending messages during the inner protocols also provide commitments to the view of virtual parties, and thus they'll also be able to open during the verification. Now all the difficulties we have mentioned are addressed. We will finally give a summary on our asynchronous multi-party gobbling. At the beginning of the protocol, the parties run a circuit-independent setup phase to prepare the pairwise keys and the secret shared feeds. The setup can be instantiated using a general constant round AMPC. Then the actual parties will distribute the preprocessing and input sharings of the outer protocol to the virtual parties via AVID plus encryption. The shares and the virtual party's local randomness will be committed afterwards. An ACS functionality is then evoked to determine a set of at least n-t parties who correctly generate their input and preprocessing shares. Only the shares from these parties are used for the multi-party gobbling and the evaluation. After invoking the ACS functionality, the committees start to run their synchronous inner protocols to gobble the virtual party's local computations for the outer protocol. Among the virtual parties, those completely consist of honest parties are guaranteed to terminate their inner protocols. The virtual parties consist of both honest and corrupted parties may never terminate their inner protocols, but once they terminate, they can be checked using MPC in the head. That is to say, we can expect the completely honest virtual parties to terminate the inner protocols and participate in the verification phase as in the synchronous case. So we only need the ratio between the numbers of completely honest virtual parties and corrupted virtual parties to be large enough. Let's see the committee size. Since the number of honest actual parties is at least 2 times the number of corrupted parties, the number of virtual parties that are completely honest is about 2 to the c times the number of corrupted virtual parties. Therefore, a constant c is enough for boosting this ratio. After the inner protocol executions, parties will invoke the ACS functionality another time and agree on a common set of virtual parties who terminate their inner protocols. The size of the common set is set to be the minimum number of completely honest virtual parties, which guarantees that the ACS will terminate and there are enough gobbled circuits for the evaluation if the verification passes. Finally, the parties run the MPC in the head verification on the common set of virtual parties. Parties will agree on a small fraction of these virtual parties and open their view. If the verification passes, all the parties have enough gobbled circuits and they can run the evaluation and obtain the outputs. Thanks for listening. I'm happy to take any question.
Okay, thank you. I guess this means that Ifan is happy to take any questions. Any questions for Ifan? Okay, so a very quick one. So the result also relies on the random oracle. Is it for the same reason as the previous, the JLOS?
Yes, I think one reason is for the underlying gobble circuits from synchronous setting, but also one is for this AVID stuff that you need to use random oracle to instantiate that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thanks to all speakers and audience of this session, and we now go to dinner.